California standby pay is also called controlled standby. Under these circumstances, an employee who is being paid by the hour is being asked to sit and wait for a call to come in from their employer. The time that they are sitting, waiting for the call to come in, is on call. They are on standby and they should be paid for that. They should be paid at least minimum wage. The more interesting scenario is if an employee is a highly compensated RN, maybe even an RN-FA. Those are the nurses in the hospital in the operating room. They're the first assistants. They may be on call and they may be getting $6.50 an hour. If that's the case and their normal hourly rate, let's say, is $75 or $80 an hour, should they be getting paid $75 or $80 an hour to sit and wait for the call to come in? That's the question. Employees in many industries may be subject to a requirement from their employer that they sit and wait for a call to come in. If they're going to be compensated for that, there is a test under California law. One question is, how fast is their response time? If the employee has to respond within 20 minutes or an hour, I've had cases where I've had to respond in 2 hours. That is a very quick response time, and that indicates that they are restricted. It may indicate, or it probably does indicate, they are geographically restricted. If you have to report in your employer in 20 minutes or half an hour, you can't be outside of the geography very far from where you have to report into. Whether it's a yard, a hospital, an oil field. Another factor is whether the assignments are mandatory. If you have a situation where employees are being called, the phone tree is going on, and managers or supervisors are saying, hey, can you go work this shift Sunday night at 7 o'clock? And the employee says, no, I can't. Oh, sorry to hear that. See you next time we work together. Have a good rest of the weekend. That's not mandatory on call. But if the employee is disciplined, maybe even fired if they don't respond to one of these calls or they pick up the phone too late, that sounds like mandatory on call. So we have A, is this restrictive? It's restrictive if there's a geography that you can't go out of. It may be restrictive if you can't drink alcohol because you have to report into an operating room, you can't be intoxicated, or you have to drive a company vehicle, or you have to focus in on work where you just can't drink. The inability to drink is a restriction. Then we have a situation where the call is mandatory. If it's voluntary, not restricted on call. Another factor in an on-call call is whether there's an agreement between the employee and the employer that there be an on-call. If there is an agreement and the employer is paying, for instance, sub-minimum wage for the employee to be on call, that is a sure sign that this is restricted, and the employer knows they're supposed to compensate the employee, but they're paying them at a sub-minimum wage. The frequency of these calls is going to matter. If the calls are merely theoretical, not something that is likely to be held as compensable under California law. Theoretical might be that, 5 or 6 times in a year, an employee actually has to respond to one. If an employee has to respond to an on-call half the time, 40% of the time when they're on an on-call shift, that's definitely enough. If they have to respond 25% of the time, that may also be enough, especially if there are repercussions for not responding. Other factors in the situation in the on-call call would include if the employer is going to be requiring this to be done on a regular basis. If it is sporadic and occasional, might not be on call either. So if you have any questions about whether you should be compensated for being on call and what rate of pay it should be and how far back you can sue, you should contact our firm. I've had many class actions, group actions, multi-employee actions for large amounts for on-call. On-call can add up very quickly because if somebody is on call one day and they're on call 8 hours or 16 hours of the day, and they work their 8-hour shift, guess what? Those 8 hours that they work are probably going to be turning into overtime or double time if they work them on the same day that they were on call. Besides merely being owed minimum wage, employees in the on-call situation may be owed many penalties, and the penalties add up also. So please contact our office at 877-525-0700 if you have an on-call situation you'd like to pursue.